Have you ever had that feeling where you look around and wonder, why does everything feel the same? Different days, but the same emotions. Different people, but the same arguments. You keep making different plans, but you always end up with the same results. You tell yourself you're trying, right? You're reading the books, you're learning, you're pushing yourself, but somehow life just doesn't seem to move forward. And then, one day, it hits you like a ton of bricks. Nothing changes, because you haven't. Let me tell you a story. A few years ago, there was a man named Daniel. He lived in a small apartment that smelled faintly of stale coffee and regret. Every single morning, he'd wake up, grab his phone, and just scroll, comparing his life to everyone else's. He saw friends buying cars, getting married, starting businesses, and he just sat there, staring at his screen, wondering where it all went wrong for him. Now, Daniel wasn't lazy. He worked hard, but his days just blended into one another, a complete blur of excuses and half-hearted efforts. He wanted to change. He desperately wanted it. But he kept waiting. Waiting for something out there to shift, a new opportunity, a lucky break, some kind of sign from the universe. And that's how most of us live, isn't it? We wait. We wait for the perfect time, for someone to finally notice us, for our circumstances to just magically get better. But here's the tough truth. Life doesn't respond to waiting. It responds to action, and not just any action, but deep, internal change. One day, an old classmate of Daniel's came to visit. He looked around at Daniel's cluttered desk, the empty bottles next to his computer, the sticky notes filled with plans that were gathering dust, and he said very quietly, "You know what your problem is? You're addicted to the idea of change, not the reality of it." Daniel didn't say anything back. He just managed a weak smile. But that night, he couldn't sleep. His friend E.S. words echoed in his mind like thunder, addicted to the idea of change. He finally realized he'd been romanticizing transformation. He was watching the motivational videos, reading the quotes, imagining success. But he wasn't becoming the person capable of sustaining that success. He was chasing the outcome instead of changing the identity that creates it. And that is the secret most people learn way too late. You cannot attract a new life with your old habits. So the next morning, Daniel did something different. He didn't start with some grand, complicated plan or a New Year's resolution. He simply cleaned his room. He threw away all the clutter. He deleted the distracting apps from his phone, and he decided to commit to just one thing, to show up for himself every single day. It was slow at first, really slow. But small changes have this strange compounding power. When you keep the promises you make to yourself, even the tiny ones, your mind starts to believe in you again. Weeks passed. He started waking up a little earlier, eating better, just walking outside for a few minutes. He stopped trying to fix everything all at once and instead focused on becoming someone who didn't need to escape his own life. And slowly, life began to respond. He wasn't getting luckier, he was just more aware. The opportunities, they had always been there. But now, he was in a state to actually see them. The people around him hadn't changed, but he started attracting different conversations because his energy was different. You see, nothing truly changes until you do. You can move to a new city, find new friends, get a different job. But if you carry the same thoughts, the same habits, and the same fears inside you, you will recreate the exact same problems everywhere you go. Change isn't a destination you arrive at, it's a decision you make. And that decision begins with radical honesty. So ask yourself this: what are you avoiding right now because it forces you to take responsibility? What are you blaming life for, when deep down, you know it's your own hesitation holding you back? And what would happen if you stopped waiting for motivation to strike and simply started being the person you keep dreaming about? Here's the thing about real transformation. It's quiet. It doesn't come with fireworks or a round of applause. It begins in the silent moment you stop lying to yourself. When you can look in the mirror and finally admit, I'm not tired of my life. I'm tired of my own excuses. That's the moment the shift begins. Daniel's story isn't special. It's the story of anyone who has ever decided they're done repeating the same patterns. Because real change doesn't come when life gets easier. It comes when you get stronger. Months later, Daniel sat at that same desk, in that same room. But he wasn't the same man anymore. The room was simple, clean, and peaceful. He looked out the same window at the same sunset, but he had a completely different perspective. He smiled, not because everything in his life was suddenly perfect, but because he had finally learned how to move through life without being trapped by it. And maybe that's what you need to hear today. You're not broken. You're just stuck in the loop of who you used to be, and the only way out is through change. But I'm not talking about the kind of change that looks good on paper or in a social media post. I'm talking about the kind that feels uncomfortable, the kind that makes you sit in silence, face your fears, and let go of who you were, piece by piece. That's real growth. That's where the old you dies and the new you begins. So, if you've been waiting for a sign, this is it. Stop waiting for the world to adjust to your hesitation. Start adjusting your inner world until the outer one has no choice but to reflect it. Because once you decide to change, I mean really change, everything around you will begin to shift. Not because life suddenly gets easier, but because you start living with purpose. Every storm feels lighter. Every failure feels like progress. And every single day starts to matter again. So here's the truth. Nothing changes until you do. Not your relationships, not your success, not your peace of mind. The world is waiting, but it's waiting on you. Make the decision, be the change, and watch how everything else follows. Thank you so much for watching. If this message resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content that helps you build a life you don't want to escape from. I'll see you in the next one.